Hi everybody, this is Chris from Golf Connect, and I am going to show you how to set up a WalkieFleet push-to-talk server. This will give you a demo version of the WalkieFleet server so you can test it out with your network radios or your Android or iOS devices and test it out and see how you like it. The demo does let you connect up to 5 accounts, and you do have to reboot that server after 24 hours. It's just one of the stipulations of the demo. But from there, once you get everything set up the way you want it and get it customized, you can easily apply a product key, and that will allow you to turn that demo server into your production server. And I would recommend that you get things like backup software and any kind of redundancy or failover plan put in place before you get it activated, and have users actually connect for production use. But hey, us at Golf Connect, we can get you set up with any kind of licensing you need for WalkieFleet. But for now, let's go ahead and get it installed and show you how easy that is. I've already went ahead and downloaded some of the items, but I'll put these notes in the video description as well, and that way you'll have it. So here's some rules on how I quickly set up the firewall ports. Here's a description of what each one of the firewall ports does. And then here's some download and website information. So we go to WalkieFleet's main website, WalkieFleet.com. You can click on download. And from here, you can download the server. You can download the dispatch console, depending on what version of Windows you're running. You can download the Android APK file. So if you can sideload the APK, or you can use the device launcher to push the APK and some programming information to your Android device or your network radio so it knows how to get connected. Now I'll do a separate video on the Android APK and the device launcher. It is a powerful tool that makes deploying a lot of devices very easy and very quickly. It also helps you load the device with your Wi-Fi information, so you don't have to go through and navigate through either a remote screen for a screenless device or using the on-screen keyboard to navigate each network radio or Android device that you want to deploy this to. So for now, we're just going to download the server and get it installed. I've already went ahead and downloaded it, so I will go into the download information and get that going. So I'm going to do the setup file here, and when it runs, it may prompt you, say, you need to protect your computer. Just hit more info, run anyway. This is a lab version of Windows Server 2019. This will run on a Windows 2018 12 server. I would use a newer version of the server operating system. That way you stay compliant. You won't risk it going out of support from Microsoft. You can even install this on a Windows 10 if you're doing a low-end deployment. But agreeing to the installation here, you can pick your own custom paths if you want. It does give you option to change the TCP ports. And again, that port right there, the 999 is a server manager port. That's how you log in and manage the server on the local computer. And the other, you can customize the voice and video recording, what features you want. If you don't even want to enable video on your push-to-talk service, you're just voice 100%, you can disable that here. It won't be enabled on the server. It will install Microsoft SQL Express. If this is a large-scale enterprise deployment, you can use your existing SQL form. You just have to tell it where your database is going to be. Pretty much, especially for demo and most deployments, you're going to go ahead and select the defaults and then hit next all the way through, let it install, and let it run. All right, setup's finished. We're going to hit finish. Now this is your default screen. This is what you're going to see when you get here. We are not connected to any other servers. If you and your parent company or sister company have multiple WalkieFleet servers running, you can actually pair them together and share channels and share push-to-talk channels. So that way, if you have a common customer in line, or you just need to get to a whole nother building or organization method, you can do that. You can connect multiple servers together and share channels. Now, the good thing is if you are running this for your entire company, but you have multiple locations, you can still use one server, open it up to the outside, or make it available across your VPN connections or something, however your networking team wants to do that. But you can have one server that connects multiple physical locations. Let's say you're in New York, you have an office in New York, that's where your server is, but you just opened up something in Miami, Florida, or you opened something out in LA, California. You can just set up channels for those radios on your main server and allow them to be accessed, and you can still run one massive push-to-talk network wherever these employees are without any fear or worry about whether your antenna on the outside of your building will reach over a few miles. So that's another great benefit of using a cellular or Wi-Fi based push-to-talk system, is the server is really only as limited as long as your handhelds have internet connectivity. So what do you get once the server manager's up and running? You have this main platform. Let's go ahead and set up our port forwarding since we had that rule, or we have those scripts set. So I'm going to run PowerShell. I'm going to run it as an administrator so it has access to make the changes that I want. I'm just going to go ahead and select all the default ports here just to make this pretty easy without customizing anything. I'm going to paste it in. Now, I like to use the PowerShell ISE module. There's two different versions. The one regular PowerShell is just like a command prompt to get you in there. I like to use the ISE so I can pre-type everything out and see what I'm doing. And I'm going to hit go or play. It's going to run all those individual commands for me, let it know everything's working okay. Now, remember when I said that I grouped it by WalkieFleet, right? That's this section right here, the group WalkieFleet. If I go into Windows Firewall under Advanced and I look at my inbound rules, look here, there's a ton of rules here. You can see where they're starting to roll in here. But I can filter by group. Whoops. I can filter by group and find WalkieFleet. And there you go. It's just a good way of helping with formatting and being able to clean things up a bit so I can see what's going on. So even if you run this and you decide, oh man, I really don't want that WebSocket rule in there, well, I can just go back in here and edit the rule and remove that port so I don't have to worry about that. So now our ports are open. If I was running this network with some radios now, I can get connected and get going. So that part of the challenge is over with. We got our PowerShell in there. So here's our network. This is the main server console here, and this is the current network that's running. I can edit the server startup settings. So here's my service port where my manager is. Maybe I need to change the SQL server. Here's some timings. Defaults work out. If you're running into some connectivity issues or you want to troubleshoot some audio issues, you can play around with some of these. And then here's a role. The role is how this particular service instance is running. Right now it's just a standalone server. I can make it the primary or the backup. Not both. You just pick one. It's either standalone by itself or this is my main server and this is where all my settings are going to be, and then I install another copy of WalkieFleet server on maybe a server in Azure or somewhere else as my backup. I make it the backup. If you make it the backup, you got to put the server identity key in here from, if this was the primary, copy this, put it in my backup, what the ports are for the server address, and that's your service port here. And then what's the delay? So the minute, if you're really want a fast turnover, you can lower this. I probably wouldn't lower it. I would be okay with a minute of downtime if something's not working, only because that, if your internet hiccup has an issue, your main service provider has an issue, and you drop a few packets, or it goes out just for a couple seconds, you really don't want this backup server activation delay to be too low, because then you'll end up having false failovers where your workstations and your handhelds will start failing over to the backup server, even though the primary server is okay. Now, the way that the whole cellular push-to-talk works is it's recording a message and it's sending that message out to all your end users. So if you were standing next to somebody, you're listening to the message and they key up to send a message, you're going to hear them talk. maybe a second, or they measure it down in milliseconds, but let's just make it easy. Let's just say a second goes by and then your radio keys up, or excuse me, or opens up and the message comes through. Well, that's because the server's recording the message and then playing it back to all the handhelds. It's buffering it. So if your network goes out for a little bit, a couple seconds, your message is still going to go out and play to all those handsets. It's still buffered. So to really worry about the server failing over in 30 seconds versus 60 seconds may end up just causing some issues for you. So you feel free to play around with it though. It's all in your preference. So start a local server. We want to get that going, making sure that it starts up okay, the Windows service is functioning, all that's good. Now, if I had to make some changes the way the server starts up, obviously I got to turn it down. But now you got some other options. We'll get into that in a little second here. What you want to see down here is you have your exit. To exit this console, server will still stay up and running. This is just the exit the GUI. And here's your licenses. Right now you've got 5 clients under demo, and you've got a PC dispatcher under demo. So you can run one workstation, can run one copy of the dispatcher software. So I'll show that in another video. You can have 5 end users connect, whether it's the Android app, the iOS app, or network radios, which is essentially just the Android app. I would stick to Android. That's where all the network radios are based off Android. The developer puts a lot of polish and clean into the Android software client. The iOS isn't bad. The only problem is the last time Apple did an iOS update, the iOS app kind of had some visual glitches that they didn't keep up with. So with as fast as these iOS updates are coming out with the new phone releases, things like that here, I would stick with Android. It seems to be updated a lot more frequently. If you have a new product keys to add, you can delete the license keys for the demos after you add the key. You want to add your license key, you want that overlap, because you don't want to remove these and then all of a sudden you're not licensed for anything and the server stops working on you. So add your license key for what you do purchase, and then you can remove the demo keys. Event log, if you need to troubleshoot, you can filter this out. New server, it's not going to have a whole lot. Here's where I was saying if you can run multiple servers. You could make another server and just change the ports. These ports are in use, so let's just go, we'll just put 1s in there and just increment. Now we've got 2 networks running once this fully finishes. It's great, right? This is the server. We are already logged in as the administrator. Let's go ahead and get logged in. Hit OK. No password. And we'll open our network. Now here's where you can add your users. Here's where you can edit your groups. And by groups, it means frequencies. So users, you can do whatever you want. Priority, if you want to raise or lower that. Priority just means if I key up over someone else, I may want to take priority over them. Well, in normal push to talk, if I key up over top of somebody else, it's just going to give me an error message or error tone until they're done broadcasting. The only time you may want to change this, if you have like a power user or admin user, your dispatch users, you can go ahead and make them maybe a little higher, so that way it oversteps some of the others. Because there's plenty of times that someone keys up a mic and dispatch has to talk over them or tone out and say, hey, all units check your radio. That may be a scenario that you run into. It's mostly on the fire EMS side, police. Emergency profile, I'll show you this in another tab down here, but you can individually assign people to different profiles if you need to put them on different channels. If you end up getting a very well organized environment where you have multiple different entities within your organization using the same push to talk service, maybe you have some channel overlap or something, or you need to route users emergency alerts to different supervisors, things like that, you can customize. Permissions, you can do custom permissions. This would mean this user wouldn't be allowed to do or not do a particular things. You want to do video calls, you uncheck it. You know, this user can't quit. You turn that off. They're not allowed to close the app. They don't get the option for that. All right, so if you have pre-populated devices, you load them in by IMEI numbers, and then you can individually assign it. So when that device actually runs the WalkieFleet, it will reference against the server who is assigned to, so the user doesn't have to log in. It automatically knows who it's supposed to be assigned to based off the IMEI number. But that does require you to pre-populate your inventory over here. All right, so forgot to add me. Okay, I'm going to just go ahead and stick with the defaults. Now I'm in here. Let's go ahead and add some channels. Now these are, I keep calling them channels or groups, but if you reference it to how you have it set up on your radio, you want to label these based off the channel location. So if you're going to use a network radio, and this is a radio that's designed, it's an Android device, but it has an antenna on the outside of it. It has a most likely a swappable battery. It has a hardware key for push to talk and maybe a hardware key for SOS. And it may even have a knob on it, so you can select individual channels based off that. You want to label these per your knob. It's good organization structure. Some push-to-talk software outside of here, like Zello is a good example, they actually don't allow you to configure what's in channel 1, what's in channel 2. It only is based off the channel names. WalkieFleet, when we do the device config in another video, it actually lets you say channel 1 equals this, channel 2 equals this. You don't have to put these numbers in like I am, but it's a good naming scheme. So if you're a server managed sysadmin or you're a network engineer and you're responsible for setting this up for your organization, or you're just playing around with it, it's a good naming scheme. And the other benefit of using a naming scheme that maps the channels to a knob selector is that you'll know if you end up having 2 channel 1s. Most of these radios, I deal with Enrico's a lot, they have 16 channels. So most organizations don't need 16 channels. I could put groups of employees on different frequencies in our channels. Maybe channel 1 is going to be dispatch, channel 2 may be emergency, channel 3 may be broadcast, channel 4 may be management, channel 5 may be execs, and then your individuals, like your maintenance may be 6, your shop or whatever you end up using, taxi drivers in north end of town, transports, buses on another channel. So you don't have any overlap. I, as a limo driver, may not be able to use channel 1 through 6. I just know I need to keep my radio on channel 7. That's my channel. That's what I'm assigned to. You could do that. Now, if you end up having 32 channels, but you end up creating 32 groups that you end up creating, but your radio only has 16, obviously you may end up having to have some overlap. You may end up having to designate particular radios as only for maintenance. These particular radios are only for transportation, and then you just have to keep up with that. I say keep it simple, easy to manage, ease your life on you. If you can assign all these channels to, maybe your management channels, they get special radios. They only get particular ones. Maybe they want the nicer end with the screen, whatever. But for the bulk of employees in most organizations, depending on where you're at, you do have options. Like I'm in Fire EMS. I have options of listening to the ambulance channels, even if I'm not on the ambulance. I have options of listening to the county sheriff, even though I'm not in the county sheriff. So it depends on your organization what you want to allow people. Obviously, some execs and management may not want everyone listening to theirs, but for the most part of everyone else's, if you have 5 radios that you have to special program for executives, but 20 other ones that can be used for anyone, they just need to pick the right channel, that's great, because that also means that for every 20 that I deploy, I may be able to have 4 or 5 that I keep in stock in the server room that are available when people break their radios, that I can go and just swap one out while I'm waiting for a new one to be purchased or warranty replacement. It's a lot easier to keep those programmed and managed. Most people don't program or manage radios to particular employees. The radios are just numbered, and an employee may come in and say, sign out radio 10. It's not really, it doesn't matter if it's John. It's just, I need to get a hold of radio 10. Dispatch has the option of tagging radio 10 to be John, or John just calls in and says, hey, this is John, I'm on radio 10 today. There's plenty of methods that you can go to do that. But this is how we create this. I'm going to use a naming scheme. I'm going to call this dispatch. So obviously this is going to be my dispatch. I typically stick with default priority until there's certain scenarios that come in place where I have to up priority. But I'm going to call this dispatch, and that has an option of, that's where people are going to check in with dispatch. That's where dispatch is going to sit. That's where I'm going to send out calls. That's where I'm going to get a hold of drivers. That's for me to sit on. I'm going to be dispatch. All right, my channel 2 though, that's going to be my emergency channel. That's where if stuff hits the fan, these are the people who are going to be notified. And I'm going to go ahead and do one. Let's do all call. Well, we'll do broadcast. There's not much of a difference between all call and broadcast. So what broadcast does is only you put your managers or your dispatchers or whoever in broadcast. You don't worry about all the end users, because whoever's in broadcast and keys up on broadcast can send that message to everyone that's assigned to this server, regardless if they're in that group or not. So you don't even have to overload it with people who just need to hear that message. You just put people in there that needs to be able to send to that group and send those broadcasts out to everyone. And then maybe, you have your team 1. We'll just call it talk 1. Talk around 1. Just normal was. Here we go. We'll do manager. So my groups, dispatch. I want to make sure everyone can talk to dispatch. Emergency. Yep, they're going to be an emergency, because if they hit the SOS, I want to know that they're in trouble. I only want the manager to be able to send the broadcast, and we'll go ahead and put everyone in the talk around. Let's just not even put the manager in the talk around. Let's just make the talk around group for the employees. If the manager needs to get a hold of somebody or switch over to another one, you can make another channel. This is just purely for demo and has really no impact on it. All right, so there's no dispatchers here. Who's in charge? We haven't added one yet. We're going to add the dispatcher to our main network here, and I'll show you how to do that. Devices will be all your physical hardware devices that sign in. Status is what you can set in the apps. So let's go green. If you're using a screen device, so not a network radio that doesn't have a screen, but like your Android phone, iPhone, or the dispatch console, you can actually assign people to different statuses. Whether you're in a meeting, you're out for lunch, you're on your break, whatever, you're not working, you can set all these custom statuses. Now, if you're an organization that is just using hardware and network radios with no screen, this is completely pointless and you don't even need to worry about it. It's just a nice to have. And it's basically just color coding usernames based off the status that they pick. All right, so the emergency profile. This is what happens if I hit the SOS button. It's the default. You can have as many as you want. Now let's say that this button right here, let's start right here. Receivers. Who's getting the alert? I need my dispatchers to have the alert. I want to send it to the channel too. So I'm going to send it to the dispatch channel. I'm sorry, the emergency channel. And maybe my manager needs to see it on their device too. The SOS button is if you have a device with a screen. So the N60 network radios have a nice color screen. Your smartphone has a nice color screen. But most of the network radios won't have a screen. You can have a separate profile that just enables this feature, and all it does is on the main screen, instead of with the push to talk button being highlighted on the screen, you'll have another icon in the corner that has an SOS symbol, and they can use the touchscreen to send the SOS instead of the orange button on the side. I personally don't use it on my touchscreens, and I use my main phone when I'm not carrying a network radio is a Sonim X P8, and it actually has a Mayday or an SOS button. So I have a physical key. I don't need it. If you want to play around with it, you want to use it, toggle it on and off, you're good. So the start voice call to an emergency group. What that does is if I push and hold that SOS button, it's going to send, normally it's going to send an audible alert and a pop-up message to dispatch. Since I added manager, it'll also send an audible alert and a pop-up message to my manager if they're using a screen phone. If they're using a non-screen phone, non-screen network radio, they're just going to hear that SOS alert going off in the background, but they won't see the visual indication. What this does here, in addition to that audible tone, it's going, like if I hit the SOS button, it's going to key my mic up. So that way, if I'm down or I'm yelling in the background, but I can't reach my radio, it will still auto key up my phone or my network radio. So I will be able to yell and someone will hear me. You do have to select your group, which we only have one emergency group. Again, completely customizable. Man down. What is man down? Man down means if I have my phone or my network radio on my hip and then it just drops to the ground. Network radio thinks maybe I fell, maybe I went down and I'm not responsive anymore. It'll wait a couple seconds before sending it. Right here it says timeout. Timeout in seconds, 5 seconds. So if I drop my phone and I don't pick it up in 5 seconds and it just stays on the ground, it's going to say, oh, there's a man down. And it's going to notify dispatch that there's a man down. It's going to notify the emergency channel that there's a man down. And then if I have this checked, it'll key up and say, it'll let me hear in the background. But it will give a man down alert, and I can dismiss this from my phone if I see it. Now, if it's a network radio without a screen, I got to call dispatch and say false alarm, clear it for me, and dispatch will clear it. So that's that. You can set your default user permissions. I don't usually use video, so I turn off video. But all this works. For my end users, if you have a screen device, I do not let them change the settings. They can search for events if they want, but typically these are screen-free devices that I deal with. I kind of turn off all the extra features that I don't want them playing with. I do leave location tracking on, so I like to see where the trucks are, where the radios are, in case there is a man down or an SOS. I need to be able to know where I send additional resources to check on that particular person. I do restrict log off and quit. But if this is for a profile for, if users are on there that have iPhones or Android devices, you may want to not do that, because if it's a personal device or a screen they use for other things, you may want to allow them to close it or log off, particularly if it's an exec that goes into meetings and they forgot they had the app running. They need to close it real quick. You want to make sure they can close that. But if it outweighs the majority, you can leave this restricted for the majority and just edit their individual user profile under custom settings to allow them to log on and off. Dispatcher permissions. So this is what the dispatcher can do. I usually don't let most of my dispatchers manage users and groups. I like to let the onboarding process, so my help desk, service desk, network admin, I like to let them have full control over new user account creations. The manage device settings, usually, again, administrators are doing this. I don't typically let that be a default for most dispatchers. Last thing you need is just a basic dispatcher going in and suddenly sending new programming information to the devices, and now they're on the wrong channels, frequencies, or the app just doesn't load anymore. So I do record that or limit that. If you're using video, you can enable video for dispatch so they can check in on users. Some of these Enrico radios actually include an option to add a body cam. You can do that, but I usually don't do video unless it's a specific need of the organization. Call recording, I usually let that stay on because I wanted them to be able to play back a transmission they may have missed. Maybe there was something caller called in, gave them information, went on scene, gave times, whatever, but they want to replay that back to make sure they heard it right. That's a handy feature to let most dispatchers have access to. Emergency report, I would leave this off and then do another dispatcher, like a dispatch account, and assign it to a manager that you manually enable that permission to. Log settings, how long do you want to keep your logs? Password policy, do you want to inflict or require strict passwords? If it's open up to the internet, I definitely make sure that you require strict passwords for all your users. That way it's less of an issue if you are worried about someone guessing a password and getting access to your push-to-talk network. Now keep in mind, when you're doing your network radios, the actual hardware, generate a complex password for that, because I'm going to show you in another video how to use the device configurator, so that way you're just copying and pasting in and then launching the device with this configuration. It's not something you're going to have to type in on the device. So that's all our settings for the network. Once we hit apply, once our users logged in, they're assigned to whatever channels that they were assigned to. If for some reason we forgot to add somebody to a particular channel, we can add them by channel, or we can go to that particular user and add them to the groups by the individual user alone. It's whatever has the need of your organization, what makes it easier for your workflow. So here is your WalkieFleet. This is our main server. This is that current server. It's the same as my machine name. If you have it named whatever else, this will pick up whatever your local machine name is. This is the first network that's on there. I made those changes. You notice the cogs aren't spinning. Start that network. Now that network's running, it'll service request. If for some reason we need to go in there and we need to change the network settings, maybe I did want to put these on the original ports, we can go do that, hit apply. You just want to make sure you restart your server when you change things like that, because it's relaunching all those servers, all those Windows services in the background. Now we want to go back into my server settings here. Here's my login. I want to change that. I'll actually put a password on it. For the demo, I'm going to leave it blank, but you actually want to put a password on that because that's your network administrator. Okay, you definitely want to make sure that you have that password on there. Now, I, as a network administrator, can decide to add multiple network administrators, but I can also make them dispatchers. And this is where we set up our global dispatchers. And I want to give them access to all groups, all networks. If you have multiple networks here, you can select all the networks, all the groups. Otherwise, if you just select the network and not all groups, you got to go back into the network settings, find that user's account, and you have to give them access to whatever groups that they're supposed to have access to. You may end up micromanaging to where you have a dispatcher for fleet, you have a dispatcher for maintenance, and you have a dispatcher for something else. You don't have one dispatcher that has access to all the different aspects of your organization. You can micromanage it, and this is how you filter it out to where you don't end up having dispatchers keying up on the wrong channel or the wrong networks even, and broadcasting out to something they shouldn't be broadcasting out to. So under the customization tab, you can actually set a network logo, and this is what will appear on the app if they're using the Android app and they're using it on a device with a screen. Otherwise, they won't see it. High demo link. This is if you download the WalkieFleet app from the Android App Store and you load it for the first time, you type in your server address, you log in, there's an option on the bottom that they put on there to allow people to sign up and log into the demo of WalkieFleet. Now this is the demo of WalkieFleet is a server that the WalkieFleet company itself runs in their own environment. They give you username, password, real generic. You can sign in and play around with it. I hide the link because I only want them dealing with my server, and I type in the IP address for my server. So that way I don't even have to worry about them changing it and trying to switch the app to another network to play around. I do put a custom banner in there. Here's the aspect ratio that you can use. You can set that. Now, location services is how you want to be able to the map overlay in the dispatch console. I usually use Google Maps. If you end up having an account with OpenStreetMap or somewhere else, you can use that as well. So here's your device defaults. Do you want to keep the processor from going to sleep? Yep. Video resolution, this is what's on most of the screens. This is kind of generic where it specs for the devices that are connecting to it. Your voice quality, that's kind of your HD versus non-HD. You know, do you want full bandwidth? If you're running into bandwidth issues because you got hundreds of users, you can try to narrow it down a bit. and then your API. Now, if you do subscribe to WalkieFleet and you get the API key and the certificate, and you do the AES 256 SSL certificate, you'll get issued that information, and you'll paste it right in here. But that's it. I want to say very quick, but that's a quick overview of how you get up and running with a WalkieFleet server, how you create your first network, set your server settings, and get it deployed or get it up and running so you can deploy it. I'll do separate videos on how to deploy to the applications, but for the most part right now, since these are the default ports based off our cheat sheet here, if you have the Android application, you can type in the IP address of your server, whether it's internal or external, depending on if you forwarded the ports or not. And you can log in with at least the administrator account or one of the other users that you created. I typically don't use the dispatch users unless they're in the dispatch software. I only use my actual users. So log in as Chris or log in as managers through the Android app just to play around and test with. And you can, without even having a network radio, you can definitely use the Android or iOS app and play around with it on your own internal network. Again, this is Chris with Golf Connect, and I hope this was a quick enough and thorough enough help for you guys to get the WalkieFleet software installed on your own server and play around with it in demo mode to test it out. I will, like I said, go over the dispatch console and the device configurator in another video and help you guys get familiar with those processes in deploying actual physical handhelds. If you have any particular questions on any features that you want to go more advanced in, please let me know, add a comment, or contact me through the site. I'll put all this in the video description so you have that information available. If for some reason this isn't allowed to be put into, the PowerShell isn't allowed to be put into the video or the YouTube notes because it's PowerShell code, I'll find another way to put it on there for it, but I'll make this all available to you. Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I hope this was a good help for you. Thank you.